Once upon a time, in the sprawling metropolis of New York City, there lived a young woman named Emily. Emily was a freelance writer, and like many struggling artists in the city, she often found herself perusing Craigslist for odd jobs to make ends meet. Little did she know that her innocent searches would lead her down a dark and terrifying path. It all began one rainy evening when Emily stumbled upon an ad in the gigs section of Craigslist. The ad read, "Looking for a house sitter for a week. Must be reliable and able to handle solitude. Generous compensation. Contact for details." Intrigued by the promise of easy money, Emily clicked on the ad and sent a quick email expressing her interest. To her surprise, she received a response almost immediately from a man named Mr. Johnson. He explained that he was going on a business trip and needed someone to look after his remote cabin in upstate New York. The pay was more than generous, and Emily, desperate for cash, eagerly accepted the offer. The following day, Emily packed her bags and embarked on the long journey to the cabin. As she drove deeper into the wilderness, the trees seemed to close in around her, and a sense of unease settled in the pit of her stomach. Eventually, she arrived at the secluded cabin, a quaint but eerie structure nestled among the towering pines. Mr. Johnson greeted Emily warmly and gave her a tour of the cabin before hastily departing, leaving her alone in the wilderness. As night fell and the forest echoed with strange sounds, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She chalked it up to nerves and tried to push the unsettling thoughts from her mind. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. Emily would wake in the middle of the night to the sound of whispers echoing through the cabin, though she was certain she was alone. Objects would inexplicably move from one place to another, and she often felt a chilling presence lurking just beyond the edge of her vision. Desperate for answers, Emily turned to the internet, searching for any information she could find about the cabin and its previous occupants. What she discovered chilled her to the core. According to local legend, the cabin was built on land that was once inhabited by a reclusive family with a dark and sinister reputation. Rumors swirled of strange rituals performed in the dead of night and disappearances that were never explained. Many believed that the family had been involved in witchcraft, summoning dark forces from the depths of the forest. Terrified but determined to unravel the mystery, Emily delved deeper into her research, uncovering accounts of other Craigslist users who had encountered similar horrors in remote locations across the country. It seemed that Mr. Johnson was not the only one using the site to lure unsuspecting victims into the clutches of evil. Armed with this knowledge, Emily knew that she had to escape the cabin before it was too late. But as she gathered her belongings and prepared to flee into the night, a bone-chilling realization dawned upon her. She was not alone. In the darkness of the forest, shadowy figures lurked, their eyes gleaming with malice as they closed in on the cabin. Emily's heart raced as she frantically searched for a way out, but the woods seemed to stretch on endlessly in every direction. With nowhere left to run, Emily barricaded herself inside the cabin and waited, her pulse pounding in her ears as the whispers grew louder and the shadows drew nearer. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, a faint glimmer of light appeared on the horizon. The first rays of dawn broke through the trees, banishing the darkness and revealing the true horror that lay hidden in the depths of the forest. As the shadows retreated into the shadows, Emily emerged from the cabin, shaken but alive. With trembling hands, she dialed 911 and recounted her harrowing ordeal to the authorities. Mr. Johnson was never found, and the cabin was eventually demolished, its dark secrets buried beneath the rubble. But for Emily, the nightmares never truly ended. Though she returned to the city and tried to resume her normal life, she could never shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the shadows of Craigslist were still lurking in the shadows, waiting to claim their next victim. And as she closed her laptop and retired to bed each night, she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever truly be safe again. In the vast realm of the internet, there exist dark corners where anonymity breeds danger. Craigslist, a once popular platform for buying and selling, has been the stage for many unsettling encounters. These true and disturbing stories delve into the eerie depths of Craigslist, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. It began innocently enough. Jenna, an antique enthusiast, stumbled upon a listing for a vintage doll on Craigslist. The ad boasted of its pristine condition and rich history, claiming it belonged to a family with a tragic past. Intrigued, Jenna arranged to meet the seller at an old mansion on the outskirts of town. As Jenna stepped into the dimly lit foyer of the mansion, a chill ran down her spine. The seller, an elderly woman with hollow eyes, greeted her with a toothless grin. Leading Jenna through the labyrinthine halls, they finally arrived at a dusty parlor adorned with antique furniture. The doll sat on a pedestal, its glassy eyes seeming to follow Jenna's every move. Despite a feeling of unease creeping over her, Jenna handed over the cash and left with the doll. That night, strange occurrences plagued Jenna's home. Footsteps echoed in emptied hallways, and objects moved on their own. Worst of all were the whispers that filled the darkness, faint but unmistakable. Terrified, Jenna returned to the mansion to confront the seller, only to find the house abandoned and derelict. The doll, however, remained, its smile mocking her from the dusty parlor. Jake was desperate to find affordable housing in the city, so when he stumbled upon a Craigslist ad for a basement apartment, he jumped at the opportunity. The rent was cheap, and the location was convenient, overlooking a tranquil park. Upon moving in, Jake noticed oddities about the apartment. The landlord, a reclusive man with sunken eyes, insisted on installing heavy locks on the basement door and forbade Jake from accessing it. Ignoring the warning signs, Jake settled into his new home. But as nights passed, he began hearing strange noises emanating from the basement, muffled cries and shuffling footsteps that seemed to echo from the depths below. Unable to ignore his curiosity, Jake picked the lock one night and descended into the darkness. What he found chilled him to the core: a network of tunnels snaking beneath the apartment complex, inhabited by emaciated figures chained to the walls. Before he could react, the landlord appeared, a crazed look in his eyes. Jake fled in terror, but the memory of those tortured souls haunted him forever. Sarah, an aspiring photographer, sought subjects for her portfolio on Craigslist. One ad caught her eye, a mysterious figure offering generous compensation for a series of portraits to be taken in an abandoned warehouse. Excited by the prospect of a lucrative gig, Sarah agreed to meet the client at the designated location. Upon arrival, she was struck by the desolation of the warehouse, a crumbling relic of a bygone era. Her client, a shadowy figure cloaked in darkness, led her deeper into the maze-like corridors, pausing only to pose for the occasional photograph. But as the session progressed, Sarah noticed something unsettling. The figure seemed to grow more ethereal with each shot, fading into the shadows until it disappeared altogether. Panicked, Sarah fled the warehouse, but when she reviewed the photographs later, she made a chilling discovery. In every image, a spectral presence loomed behind the figure, its eyes filled with malice. Haunted by the experience, Sarah abandoned her photography career, convinced that some entities were best left unseen. Desperate for money to cover his mounting debts, Mark turned to Craigslist in search of quick cash. He stumbled upon an ad promising substantial compensation in exchange for a kidney donation, a tempting offer for someone in his dire financial straits. With little regard for the risks, Mark arranged to meet the organ dealer in a secluded alleyway. But as he handed over the precious organ, a wave of regret washed over him, a gnawing sense of dread that only intensified as he watched the dealer disappear into the night. Weeks passed, and Mark's health deteriorated rapidly. Nightmares plagued his sleep, visions of shadowy figures looming over him with hungry eyes. When he sought medical help, he was met with grim news. His remaining kidney was failing, a consequence of the black market transaction. Cornered by his own desperation, Mark found himself ensnared in a web of deceit and greed, his life hanging in the balance as he grappled with the consequences of his fateful decision. When Emma's roommate abruptly moved out, leaving her with an exorbitant rent to cover, she turned to Craigslist in search of a replacement. After a series of disappointing interviews, she finally found a suitable candidate, a quiet, unassuming woman with impeccable references. Despite initial reservations, Emma welcomed her new roommate into their shared apartment. But as days turned into weeks, strange occurrences began to unfold. Objects vanished without a trace, and eerie whispers echoed through the halls at night. Emma's suspicions turned to her enigmatic roommate, who seemed to possess a dark secret hidden behind her placid demeanor. Determined to uncover the truth, Emma delved into the woman's past, only to uncover a trail of disappearances stretching back decades. Terrified for her safety, Emma confronted her roommate, but before she could act, the woman vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but an empty room and a lingering sense of dread. Haunted by the memory of her vanished roommate, Emma vowed to never trust blindly again, knowing that sometimes the darkest secrets dwell in plain sight. These true and disturbing Craigslist encounters serve as a chilling reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface of the internet. In the shadows of anonymity, unsuspecting individuals can fall prey to the sinister forces that dwell in the digital realm. As these stories illustrate, the line between reality and nightmare is perilously thin, and the consequences of a single fateful encounter can echo through eternity. So tread carefully, dear reader, for the internet is a vast and treacherous landscape where darkness reigns supreme in the hidden corners. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled deep within the woods of upstate New York, there was a darkness lurking beneath the surface. It was a darkness that whispered through the trees and slithered through the shadows, waiting for unsuspecting prey to stumble into its grasp. The town had always been known for its eerie atmosphere, with rumors of strange happenings and unexplained disappearances dating back decades. But it wasn't until the rise of the internet and the popular classifieds website Craigslist that the true horrors of Willow Creek began to reveal themselves. The cabin in the woods? It started innocently enough, with a young couple from the city looking for a weekend getaway. They stumbled upon a listing for a cozy cabin nestled deep within the woods of Willow Creek, promising peace and tranquility away from the hustle and bustle of city life. Excited for a romantic retreat, they eagerly contacted the owner and arranged to rent the cabin for the weekend. But as they ventured deeper into the forest, a sense of unease began to settle over them like a heavy fog. The cabin itself was dilapidated and rundown, far from the picturesque getaway they had envisioned. But it was too late to turn back now, so they unpacked their bags and settled in for the night. As darkness fell over the forest, strange noises echoed through the trees, and shadows danced on the walls of the cabin. They tried to convince themselves it was just their imagination, but the feeling of being watched never faded. In the dead of night, they were jolted awake by the sound of footsteps outside the cabin. Heart-pounding, they huddled together in fear as the door creaked open and a figure emerged from the darkness. It was a man, his face obscured by shadows, his eyes gleaming with malice. He whispered tales of murder and madness, his words sending shivers down their spines. Terrified, they fled into the woods, guided only by the pale moonlight above. But no matter how far they ran, the darkness seemed to follow, whispering their names on the wind. The haunted doll. In a quiet suburb on the outskirts of Willow Creek, a young mother stumbled upon a listing for a vintage doll on Craigslist. Intrigued by its eerie charm, she arranged to meet the seller at a nearby park to make the exchange. But as soon as she laid eyes on the doll, a chill ran down her spine. Its porcelain face was frozen in a hauntingly lifelike expression, and its glassy eyes seemed to follow her every move. Ignoring her unease, she handed over the money and took the doll home to her daughter, who immediately fell in love with its vintage charm. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. Toys would mysteriously move across the room, and eerie laughter echoed through the halls at night. Her daughter complained of nightmares and whispered tales of a ghostly presence lurking in the shadows. Desperate to rid her home of the sinister presence, the mother reached out to the seller on Craigslist, only to discover that they had vanished without a trace. In a last-ditch effort to save her family, she gathered the doll and set out into the woods, determined to uncover the truth behind its haunted past. But as she delved deeper into the forest, the darkness closed in around her, and the whispers of the trees grew louder with each step. And as she finally reached the heart of Willow Creek, she realized too late that some secrets are better left buried. The Devil's Bargain. In the heart of downtown Willow Creek, a struggling artist stumbled upon a listing for a mysterious painting on Craigslist. Intrigued by its dark and foreboding beauty, he arranged to meet the seller at a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town. But as soon as he laid eyes on the painting, a sense of dread washed over him like a tidal wave. Its twisted imagery seemed to warp and shift before his eyes, and he could feel its malevolent gaze boring into his soul. Ignoring the warning signs, he handed over his life savings and took the painting home to his studio, where he became consumed by its dark power. His once vibrant artwork took on a sinister tone, and he found himself painting scenes of death and destruction with an almost feverish intensity. But as the days turned into weeks, he began to realize the true cost of his obsession. His friends abandoned him, his health deteriorated, and his mind became consumed by madness. Desperate to break free from the painting's grip, he reached out to the seller on Craigslist, only to discover that they were nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. And as he delved deeper into the mystery, he uncovered a truth more horrifying than he could have ever imagined. For the painting was not just a work of art, but a gateway to a world of unimaginable darkness. And by unleashing its power, he had unwittingly sealed his own fate. As the shadows of Willow Creek closed in around him, he realized too late that some bargains are made not with the devil, but with something far older and far more sinister. And in the end, there was no escape from the true horrors that lurked within. The stories of Craigslist encounters in Willow Creek serve as a chilling reminder that not everything is as it seems, and that sometimes the darkest horrors are hidden in plain sight. So the next time you browse the internet in search of adventure, remember to tread carefully, for you never know what darkness may be lurking just beyond.